In the 1940s, in a very quiet city in the state of Wisconsin, there were a man named Edward Gein. He was known among the villagers as a simple and poor man with low voice and always helping people of his village when needed. Everyone testified his calmness and respect, and no one ever felt fear or suspicion towards him. But the truth was behind the closed doors of his house. There were a very scary secret there. A secret that as soon as the police entered the house and discovered it, everything changed. The place was not just a crime scene, it was a scene of such horror that it caused one of the investigators to suffer severe psychological shock which affected him for years and ended with his death later. So, who is Edward Gein? And what is the dangerous secret he was hiding behind the walls of his house? That is what we will find out today. Edward Theodore Gein is an American man of German origin, born on August 27, 1906, in the city of Wisconsin, in La Crosse County. Edward was known as Ed, was the second child of George Philip Gein and Augusta Wilhelmine Gein, both of German origin, and he had only an older brother named Henry. His mother, Augusta, was a very religious Christian woman to the point of strictness, and she followed the Lutheran denomination of the Protestant Church. Augusta was full of strange and strict ideas, which she always tried to transfer to her children, like she used to tell them that women are inherently perverted beings and just tools of the devil, and she also used to talk to them about the lack of morality in the world and the evils of drinking alcohol. Augusta was used to read into them every afternoon verses of the Bible, specifically from the Old Testament and Book of Revelation, and not just in verses, but she usually focused on the verses talking about death, killing, and divine justice. And Gein from that time was intensely obsessed with his mother. As for Gein's father, he was known as a violent and alcoholic man, and he usually abused his two children and his wife, to the extent that Ed later stated that there was ringing in his ears from the intensity of the beating. George Gein worked as a carpenter and tanner, and was a fireman in the city and had a grocery store, but later he sold the store and left the city with his family and lived next to a farm in Plainfield County. This farm was relatively isolated from the rest of the city and residents. Augusta Gein took advantage of the isolation of the farm they were living in so that no one from outside of the house could influence her children's thoughts. Gein joined a school affiliated with the village he lived in, and most of his time outside school doing chores on their farm. Gein was a shy child, and his classmates and teachers sometimes noticed strange behavior from Gein, like that he would laugh suddenly without any reason, as if laughing at a joke he thought in his mind. All his attempts to make friendships usually failed because of his mother was so strict that she used to punish him when he tried to befriend anyone, as she didn't want him to be influenced by any outside thought. But despite his weak communication skills, he was somewhat good at school, especially in reading. On April 1, 1940, George, Gein's father, died of a heart attack at the age of 66, and Ed and his brother Henry had to work several jobs in the city to help provide for living expenses. And people used to see Ed and Henry as calm young men and no troublemakers. And Ed usually babysat the children in the town, and it was clear that Gein could easily interact with children. After a while, Henry started to date a divorced woman who had two children and decided to move and live with her and leave the farm. Henry was worried because of his brother's strong attachment to their mother, and Henry did not love their mother as much as Gein loved her, and he used to speak ill of her in front of his brother Ed, which made him shocked and very sad. And on May 16, 1945, Henry was burning vegetation on their property, and he lost control of the fire and called for help from the firefighters. And when the firefighters arrived and put out the fire, there were no trace of Henry. Then, Ed reported to the police that his brother was missing, and the authorities sent search teams to look for Henry, who was 43 at this time. And surprisingly, they found Henry's body face down on the ground. It was clear that the body had been dead for some time, and since there were no visible signs of fire or injuries on the body, the cause of death was determined to be a heart attack. However, Professor Harlow Chake, a crime specialist, said there were bruises on Henry's head, but the possibility of a crime was later dismissed, and the forensic team listed the cause of death as asphyxiation. The authorities accepted this theory, and no official investigation was opened, and the body was not autopsied. When Henry died, Ed and his mother lived alone in the house, but Henry's death affected Augusta severely, causing her to suffer a stroke that led to paralysis shortly after his son's death. and Ed dedicated all his time and energy to serve his mother. And in 1945, Ed and his mother visited a man who lived nearby to buy hay, and when they reached the house, they saw Smith violently beating a dog non-stop. And suddenly a woman came out of Smith's house and told him to stop immediately, but Smith continued beating the dog until it died. Augusta was very upset by the scene, but what upset her was not Smith's act of violence and killing the dog, but that woman came out and tried to stop him and told Ed that this woman was not married to Smith and that she was just a prostitute. This somewhat explains Augusta's strict mentality and lack of mercy in her heart. Later, Augusta suffered another stroke, but at this time her health deteriorated severely until she died on December 29, 1945, at the age of 67. Augusta's death was a big shock to Ed. Augusta was, for him, his love and only friend in life, but after that, he became completely alone in this world. After his mother's death, Gein returned to the farm and started working and earning money from various jobs. Gein was known in the village as a poor and kind man, to the point that they allowed him to enter their homes freely and sometimes invited him to dinner and let him be with their children safely. After Augusta's death, Gein boarded up the rooms his mother used and any place in the house where she used to sit, completely sealing them so that no one could touch them. While the whole house was very dirty, these rooms were perfectly cleaned. Gein lived in a small room next to the kitchen and used to read pulp magazines and adventure stories, especially those talking about cannibalism and the brutality of the Nazis, especially the war criminal Ernst Koch, who in World War II killed prisoners to make lambs from their skins, and remember this name so well. On December 8, 1954, there was a woman named Mary Hogan, aged 51, who had a small bar in Wisconsin, and after a normal work day, while she was closing the bar, Gein approached the bar and spoke to her normally and calmly. And suddenly, in the middle of the conversation, he drew a small .22 caliber pistol, raised it to her head, and shot. Then he dragged her body outside the bar and transferred it to his car via a ramp he had prepared beforehand. It took a long time to move the body slowly to his farm, where he began cutting the body and making furniture and home decorations from her bones and skin. In November 1957, just 3 years after killing Mary Hogan, there was a woman named Bernice Worden, aged 58, who had a son named Frank Worden. Bernice owned a hardware store in Plainfield and was known in the town as a quiet woman and responsible for her store. Gein was accustomed to visiting this store occasionally, but once he entered the store normally as a customer and spoke to her calmly like the first time was Mary Hogan, and suddenly, in the same manner, he raised the gun at her and shot her directly in the head. After killing her, he transferred her to the farm and did the same thing he did with Mary Hogan, cutting the body and using parts of it for household purposes. The police later discovered that he used her bones for decorative furniture and her skin to make lamps, similar to the war criminal mentioned earlier, whom he used to read about, and her crimes. And according to villagers, they said they saw the hardware store's truck leaving the back of the building at 9:30 in the morning. And the scene was not strange to them because it was deer hunting season, and they thought Bernice went hunting as well. And what delayed discovering the case, that day there were not many customers as usual. And at 5 p.m., Frank Worden, Bernice's son, entered the store and was surprised that the cash register was open and the floor was covered in blood. He searched for his mother in the whole store but found no trace and immediately called the police. Frank told investigators that the night before his mother's disappearance, Gein was already in the store and he said he would come in the morning to buy a gallon of antifreeze. And the last receipt paid in the store was for the gallon of antifreeze, which indicated that Gein was there that morning, which made the police consider him the main suspect. That night, a police patrol was sent to arrest Gein, but when they entered the house, there was a scary surprise waiting for them. Before entering, the police saw, through the glass, a horrifying scene, a body hanging upside down, without a head, like a sheep. When they entered, they discovered that it was Worden's body hanging, and they found a horizontal rod at her ankles and ropes on her wrists, and the torso had been dressed out like a deer. After the police completed the search, they found a huge collection of furniture and decorations made of human parts, a trash can of human skin, human skulls on the bedposts, leggings made from human leg skin, and the list is long. And of course, they found Gein in the house and arrested him. After Gein's arrest and during his interrogation, he confirmed to the investigators that between 1947 and 1952, he visited cemeteries about 43 times at night to exhume recently buried bodies of women, especially those physically resembling his mother, and he tanned their skins to make household items. He also confessed that he robbed 9 graves and stole their bodies shortly after the funerals, and he confessed that after his mother's death, he tried to make female suits from women's skin in an attempt to resemble his mother.
Did you work all night at that time? I should think you have.
That's right.
What would you do with the sexual part?
That was in.
One was painted, they said.
Oh, that one, when they died, I just put the thing over it. Is there anything like,
How did you start?
Like I say, not before years. So there's a bunch of photographers from the newspapers want to take a picture. You want to take a picture? No, it's not yet. So we got to take the statement off.
Would you enjoy it while you were doing it?
That's the worst part of it. I really didn't then. I knew better, restless.
When you dig these graves up, you were kind of in a haze, too, is that it?
That's what I could do. Just, how you do it.
And then one time you said you were trying to realize what you were doing and you covered her up without taking anything.
That's right.
What would you do with the sexual parts then?
They them in a box, that was in.
And what would you do with the head?
That must have been taken from reading about these magazines and everything. Taking the flesh off like a headhunter.
Gein also confessed killing Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden, but he denied any other accusations of killing anyone else. In fact, Gein had been accused several times of incidents of women disappearing between 1947 and 1957. And on October 24, 1953, there were a 14-year-old girl named Evelyn Hartley. That night, she was babysitting a 20-month-old child at the home of a professor called Viggo Rasmussen in La Crosse State College. That night, her father called her several times because she was supposed to return home at 8:30 p.m. But when this time arrived, she had not arrived home. And after repeated calls with no answers, he drove to Rasmussen's house and found the doors locked, lights and radio on, and items scattered everywhere. And he found his daughter's glasses broken on the upper floor, and he did not find any trace of his daughter in this house. At this point, suspicion fell on Gein, and he was arrested and interrogated regarding Evelyn Hartley's disappearance. But he denied involvement, and he passed two lie detector tests, which led to his acquittal at this time. And actually, the police didn't find any remains of Hartley while searching Gein's properties. And several similar incidents, like Evelyn's case, accused Gein, but there was not enough evidence to prove his guilt, and their cases remain closed to this day. After Augusta Gein's death, Gein felt a huge inner void because he had no one to communicate with, which caused his fantasies to expand and dominate him instead of using normal human relationships. And during the investigation, Detective Joe William tried to ask questions about the death of Henry, his brother, who was skeptical of the idea that Gein had killed his brother. And according to the writer George Arendt, who studied the case, he said that it was possible unlikely that Henry's death was committed by Gein's hand and could have been done as revenge for his mother because his brother usually spoke badly about his mother, which made Gein hate his brother and want to get rid of him for his mother's sake. And his strong attachment to his mother and need for her after her death greatly contributed to motivating his crimes. And he had a major internal conflict, a strong love for his mother and a sense of loneliness, which made him try to replace or compensate her in any way. On November 21, 1957, Gein's first trial was held, which was for the charge of killing only one person. Regarding the second murder charge, it was dropped after discovering that the investigator assaulted Gein by hitting his head and face with a brick wall during the investigation, causing them to claim that Gein confessed under torture, resulting in the first confession being inadmissible. Strangely, the investigator later died of heart failure in 1968 at age 43, reportedly because of psychological shock from the horror of Gein's crimes. At the trial, he wasn't found guilty. Gein acted on the basis of being insane and mentally unfit to stand before the court. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and he was sent to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane and later transferred to the Mendota Mental Health Institute in Madison. And in 1968, 11 years after his first trial, doctors said Gein was now mentally able to consult with a lawyer and participate in his defense. And his second trial was held on November 7, 1968 and lasted a week. And the psychiatrist testified that Gein told him he didn't know if he killed Worden intentionally or accidentally. And Gein informed him that while inspecting his gun in Worden's store, the weapon suddenly went off and killed Worden. And he claimed he did not aim the gun at Worden and he did not remember anything that morning. Upon the defense's request, Gein's trial was conducted. Judge Robert Goldmer acquitted Gein, considering his mental safety. But after testimonies from prosecution and defense doctors, Goldmer ruled Gein not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him to be committed to the state hospital for the criminally insane. And Gein continued living in a mental hospital for the rest of his life, until he died on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77, due to respiratory failure and lung cancer. Gein was buried between his parents and brother in Plainfield Cemetery, and this was the end of one of the most maniac serial killers in the history of the United States. And this is the end of the video today. If you like the video, so you can hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you the next time.